Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 123, with Karthik Krishnan of MentorWorks, a really interesting organization, kind of a financial ed tech organization working to support students with alternative financing models for their college education, really any higher education. So income share agreements, mentoring, career support, just really interesting, innovative stuff. Really grateful to have the opportunity to talk through it with Karthik. And a digital note, there is a sale going on starting tomorrow, April 22nd, for a few days on the merch store. So definitely go check that out. Really cool stuff there. Just added a new design. So really appreciate the support of the show there, and appreciate you for listening to this episode number 123 with Karthik Krishnan. All right, I am super excited to have this conversation. Something that came about, some networking that happened at the recent virtual South by Southwest EDU conference that I was really excited I got the opportunity to be a mentor at. So this is a byproduct of that. And so I'm super grateful to have some time to talk through MentorWorks and all that is entailed with their efforts in the education space here. But we will start out as we always do. Karthik, if you want to introduce yourself and give a brief overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. And thanks for having me here. My background is in higher education. So I have a doctorate in finance from Boston College. Then came over to Northeastern University for a tenure track job. After which, you get tenure, and then apparently you search for the meaning of life. But in that time, I have taught over 2,000 students. I've written articles about student loans and how it impacts individuals' financial and personal outcomes in careers and such, which kind of motivated me to figure out how we can set up a education financing platform that can work for the student. And so started MentorWorks in late 2016 and had a great ride so far. So, and then here I am. So that's kind of a little bit about my professional journey. And really excited to, we're a mission oriented organization. So we're really excited to create a framework that helps students both through financing, but also with providing social capital, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's who we are. We're a social impact company with a real focus on helping students do well, get the skills that they need, and find jobs.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I mean, I met with a colleague of yours at the conference through that mentoring, and I just found the work that you all are doing just really compelling, and excited to talk more about it and share it out with the world through this show here. And I guess, we'll start there just really quickly too. Just if you want to explain a bit more about MentorWorks, I mean, just maybe how it came to be, or, just, a little bit more detail about the work that you do with the students that you support and everything. But yeah, we could just give a little bit more detail, and then we'll go on from there.
Sure. The genesis of MentorWorks was really kind of some of the past work that I've done is on, how, for example, startups are financed and how early investors come in, and fund these startups and then help them do well, by providing advice, expertise, connections, whatnot. And, being in that space, having done some research in that area, as well as having done research in the education finance space, it was really more of a melding of different spaces that brought MentorWorks into being. So it was really an extrapolation of the notion that, well, if these investors can fund these startups and help them with support structures, can we not do the same thing with individual students and fund and support them? And that was really the genesis of this. Obviously, at that time we were starting out, we did not know what an income share is. At that time, Purdue had just started out its own ISA program. So it was kind of a great time to be thinking about this because it provided some validation that, this can happen. But I think what we started out with was this fundamental notion of fund and support. We always wanted to be kind of a partner with a student to fundamentally ensure that they do well. And if they don't do well, we first of all don't penalize them with payments that they have to make on their financing. And secondly, we help them get ahead in life. We have a careers platform that I'll talk about as well. So that was kind of the starting point of all this. Over the last 3-4 years, we have been working to put it all together, and I'm happy to say that I think we've done a pretty good job. Overall, we have scaled to a point where we are really at a place where we expect to grow really fast at this point. More importantly, the impact that we've had through our platform has been very substantial. So, as an example, students that we have funded have experienced 126% increase in their income since we funded them. Our platform has a majority of minority students, and we have built a pretty robust career support system. We call it the Talent Accelerator platform, where anybody can sign up and they can seek advice on, hey, how do I improve my career outcomes? How do I build a career search strategy? And we have experts on our team who have built this out. And anybody who takes an ISA with us gets access to this. We then interface our students with employer partners, and then make sure that they get the visibility, right? I mean, if you think about a lot of the low income students with who don't have the family connections to, say, pick up a phone and get an internship or get an interview, we kind of fill that role here for a lot of our students. And let me step back a bit and talk a little bit about the financing piece, right? I mean, the financing piece is income share agreements, which has been covered a lot in the press. But I think for us, it's part of the solution alongside our career support. But an income share agreement at its very core is a student pays a percentage of their income for a fixed amount of time. If they do not have sufficient income, they don't make any payments. So below a minimum income level, they don't have to make a payment, and that's not a default. If they do really well, there's a cap on the total payments they make. And plus, we have early payment options where they pay even less. So we have kind of created a financing model that creates a number of protections for our students. And this is a model that's much more forgiving. For example, if you did not have a job and were unable to pay, it's not a ding on your credit history because it's part of the agreement. The other benefit is interest does not accrue and capitalize. So you don't keep adding your unpaid interest onto the balance, and that particularly for minority students has been particularly burdensome because it increases their principal amount and the time to maturity of these loan agreements. And finally, I think one of the big advantage that many people don't talk about ISAs is that income share agreements are much more progressive, whereas loans are not in the sense that if your income goes down, your percentage of income you're paying on a loan actually increases because your income is going down, your payment is fixed, right? Whereas in an income share agreement, as your income goes down, your percentage of income is fixed. So in that sense, an ISA is much more progressive as well. So it's a much more protective form of financing than a similar loan agreement.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely make a lot of sense in terms of just kind of a suite of options for students to finance their degrees, and especially just with the additional support that you give, because I just haven't really heard of anybody working in that way to be so active in this process for students, where, there are a lot of financing options out there, but it is kind of just like, okay, checks in the mail kind of thing, like good luck. And, kind of who knows what happens to that student after that point in terms of their persistence and success and graduation and career outcomes and everything. So I think that's why I think it was so compelling to me of how you all are coming at this and really trying to support the students who, like you said, just don't have the connections or resources perhaps to navigate higher ed in the same way that others who aren't from those backgrounds, and the people that are first generation and all that, like they kind of just are figuring it out as they go. And I think if there's just somebody, who's there to just be a helpful guide and kind of coaching from the sidelines, to give help as it's needed, just is hugely beneficial. And like you said, I mean, that's just a really way to kind of to frame it in terms of how an ISA can be a really compelling and useful option for students to consider. So, and I guess you already kind of spoke about this, but I think maybe it kind of bears repeating, or just sort of like I don't know any further elaboration, but just like there are just so many problems with the current kind of financing options for college students, and especially the one like you said of like you're struggling to repay, and there's all this interest, and it's just compounding and growing, and like you're a lot of people often like will say like, yeah, I've been making my payments for however long, and the balance is just as much or larger than it was when I started, or something like that. So I don't know if there's just more you want to elaborate on there in terms of like the financing piece, and then we can kind of move on to some other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the income share agreement framework it does two things. One is, now that I've funded a student with an ISA, I've effectively kind of tied my fate with the student's fate, right? This is, student debt is effectively non-dischargeable. So one way or another, you're getting paid back. But in an income share agreement, it's, if the student doesn't do well, the funder, is not going to do well. It's an incentive mechanism. So I'm a financial economist, so I like the notion of incentives. So the student has somebody whose outcomes are tied to their outcomes. So now I have every incentive in the world to help that individual do well. And this is the thesis we always we liked about ISAs, and we started with in the first place. There is another kind of interesting but more subtle idea related to ISAs that's worth the mentioning, which is an income share agreement doesn't respond well when you're talking about high variance income programs. What that means is that, if I'm offering an ISA, we cannot fund programs that have low employment rate, right? Whereas in a loan, as long as you have the right metrics of credit, you will get a loan. On the federal government, there are even less barriers. To me, what that means is, if somebody is willing to offer an ISA for a program, they are sending a signal that there's a high likelihood you're going to get a job from that program, because I'm willing to make a bet that you will do well from this program. So there is a signaling effect that, I don't know how many people think about, but I think it's an important one, because essentially someone, either the school or another investor, is willing to bind their fate with the outcomes of the program. And that says something about the program. And another kind of related issue is, we have heard kind of folks talk about, well, an ISA is great if you have a really high paying job. And that is not quite right. So, for example, some of the criticisms of ISAs has been that you can only fund either engineers or MBAs or whatnot. And the fact is that you can create a viable ISA program, given that there's a funder, for any program with reasonably moderate levels of income. So for example, we have funded HVAC technicians or electricians. We don't need to fund coding bootcamp or programming or technology. And I think what's important there to understand is, like, income share agreements, you can kind of work around some level of average income. Where I think ISAs have a hard time justifying the economics is, again, the likelihood of getting a job. So it's the variance of income that ISAs are more sensitive to, which means that it's harder for somebody to fund a program which has low placement rate, but you can fund a program which has a low average income, because you can price around that. What you cannot price around is uncertainty.
Mhm.
So you can actually fund a number of vocational programs. We have seen vocational programs, diesel mechanics. We have seen welding. We have seen HVAC technicians. Then we have seen coding. We have seen nursing being funded with ISAs. And all of the commonalities, it's not that they have the same average income. The commonality is that they have very high likelihood of getting a job, which is another signal for somebody who's saying, well, if this program has an ISA, somebody is making a bet that the outcomes are going to be good from a employment perspective. What that means is ISAs are not necessarily perfect for every kind of educational opportunity that somebody's looking for, but it is a reasonably well-defined option for somebody looking for, well, is this going to get me a job, and what is the signal for that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, that's just, I know, just because I like listen to like the free economics podcast a lot, and they talk a lot about like incentives, and I start to see that a lot just in the world as I observe it, and then just yeah, that idea is like, from an economic perspective, uncertainty is the enemy. Like if you have a certain level of predictability with, even if like work is seasonal, and different things like that, it's like, well, it's a pretty predictable rotation of, kind of the ups and downs and all that. And we can plan accordingly. So that idea of getting federal student loans, which on one hand is like, it's fair in the sense that, yeah, like pretty much anybody can get them. There is like a limit on how much you can get, but kind of open to all. And that can be a readily available funding source. But yeah, there's no checks and balances on how much anybody should take and, their program of study and kind of the return to be able to repay that amount and everything. So yeah, very, very, very well put. So I guess just to really put like a finer bow on this, I mean, how do you see this work benefiting both the students and the institutions? Because I think there's kind of a clear case in terms of kind of having it be compelling for both of those constituents. But just curious, maybe how you see it and how you put it together.
Absolutely. I think, as I said before, right, this option enables a broader range of students to get support, financial support to get an education, to complete their education. And this is a non-loan format. So, from the perspective of taking on education, which is a product where you don't necessarily get the final outcome, which is employment and income, until some time, and that's uncertain. You're now, in accounting parlance, balancing, liabilities and assets, in the sense that, if you don't get a job, you don't make the payments. If you get a job, high enough income, you make the payments, which is quite frankly kind of mitigating a lot of the risk that a student takes on by taking on a ton of loan, right? Whereas if you take a straight up loan, you owe that amount, or it keeps accruing interest and just adds on to the principal. So from a student's perspective, it really de-risks the notion of education. And certainly some people would argue that, well, then you have to worry about adverse selection, moral hazard, and we have ways of dealing with that kind of stuff. But from a, we have in our own investments, we have zero delinquencies at this point. And we have a few students looking for jobs, but in general, our students are able to find jobs. Many of them have paid back early. A lot of them come back and help out with future generations of students by mentoring them, or working with us on webinars and things like that on our talent accelerator platform. So they do feel like they have been treated well. Students, and obviously I'm also now talking holistically about the work that MentorWorks does. Again, students usually are at this stage pretty anxious about what they're getting into, the value of the product, and so we put in a lot of effort for transparency and such. So and then going on to the institutional side, institutions, I think we'll all agree that there is a fundamental issue with higher education, how it's financed, how incentives are set up. And so you can have institutions, suffering for enrollment where there are great programs and some great faculty. And then there are other institutions who perhaps are great at marketing, but not so much at placement, where students can simply go because they can access federal loans. And so the two ways in which this model can really benefit institutions is, first of all, by increasing enrollment, because financing begets enrollment, right? I mean, if you cannot finance your education, you're not going to get in. The other one is it supports institutions that are able to get higher employment likelihood. So it helps creating a separation and helps institutions with better outcomes get more enrollment, and that's, I believe that's the way it should be, because students are better off going to institutions where, especially for programs where looking for an end job, you're more likely to get a job. So students are kind of then able to access higher quality program, because we will only invest in higher quality program as defined by the likelihood of finding a job. If your end goal is not finding a job, then perhaps an ISA is not the best financing option for you, and maybe you should be looking for something else. But for those majority of students that are looking for employment at the end of the day, this allows those students to find those institutions which we believe are higher quality institutions, and we are willing to take the risk there, and those institutions to find those students. So it's a two-sided benefit.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I saw as well. I just kind of wanted to, hear it put in your own words, and I think, yeah, I mean it's hugely compelling in the way that like, a student can have that barrier again. You can get federal student loans pretty readily, but like be in such a better position to remove that barrier, financials, be supported through to their graduation, so that all that time and effort and that financial investment, even though through an income share agreement, kind of coming through like a different pipeline, like it is just worthwhile, because obviously there's so many students out there, as the financials kind of get all out of sync or out of whack for any number of reasons, like they just have some college and a bunch of debt, so this sort of approach helping to hopefully avoid that and alleviate that concern for any student is just, I think, such a great approach. And I know, would resonate with the students who are pursuing their higher education, and also the institutions that are enrolling them, so that they can just have that pathway that is going to be just smoother for the student to be able to focus on their studies and prepare for their career afterward. So,
one thing I would add to that is also that this financing option also facilitates other types of educational opportunities. So, we were talking about vocational programs. We're talking about short-term skills-based programs. So it certainly can be a useful option for primary, the first time you're getting an education. It can be a useful option if you want to get alternative types of education where perhaps federal funding is not available. And it can also be a great option for scaling up. So we've seen a lot of folks in that space, people who have lost jobs and are trying to scale up, get a short-term certificate and then find their next employment. This is a great option for them as well.
Yeah, I mean, because that's certainly a tough position to be in. If you know that, maybe you just got furloughed or lost your job and you don't have the financial resources to invest or even take on loans, doing something that is going to lead to gainful employment, and using something like an ISA to do that, even for something that's comparatively lower cost to a 4-year degree or something. I know, just speaking for myself, something like that would be like a very intriguing option. I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe I'd pursue a certificate, out of pocket, because I don't have an employer to pay for it or any of those sort of things to, help me get to my next opportunity. So, I appreciate you making that point. So as you all have immersed yourself in sort of this financial technology world within the higher education space and kind of the continuing and professional education space as well, what do you see on the horizon relevant to this topic? Obviously, there's been a lot of disruptions just in terms of how people study over the past year, and maybe what are perhaps some of the more like in-demand careers and different things like that, or like the interest maybe from partners, in your organization. But yeah, just what do you see on the horizon? Kind of open-ended, broad question, just however you want to take it.
I guess there are a few different parts to this answer, right? One is, in general, where is higher education headed? That's as big a question as you can ask, and but I'll try to kind of get my hands around it a little bit, which is that there seems to be an increasing interest in the kind of skills-based programs that we just talked about, right? And it could be somebody who has already taken up a traditional 4-year college degree and who's looking to kind of add that last milestone of skills. It could be somebody who just got laid off and are looking to scale up and trying to find a job. And what we are certainly seeing is it's funny because it's not just one-off private players that are trying to do this now. It's even accredited institutions that are getting into this space, either with private partners or by themselves. So we will see a larger amount of availability of such programs, and given that ISAs can be a really good option for those kind of schools, I think we'll also see a larger amount of uptake on the ISA side as a result of that. I think certainly people have talked about the potential demise of a lot of schools that are smaller and maybe not have enough enrollments, and I think there's going to have to be a clear understanding of, well, where is it that that these educational institutions needs to improve. And my personal take on it is, it's about the jobs, and it's about getting people closer to a job. So if you cannot speak to that, I think more and more people are going to have issues with that. On the fintech and the finance side, certainly there's more investment that is interested in this opportunity, both regular institutional dollars, but also we're seeing an increasing amount of impact, and by that I mean concessionary impact dollars getting really interested in funding these type of programs. And we have some of our investors who are impact investors who want to see significant impact based outcomes for underserved students, low income students, minority students, and that's been a big push. And I think traditional institutions of higher education have to address how they're going to increase the diversity of their programs, given the cost of their programs. So employers are looking for diversity. As a practical matter, we have employer partners who have asked us about, hey, we really want to ramp up the diversity of our programs. In fact, I think I heard a term today which is new to me. I think it was somebody said it's neural diversity, which is kind of interesting. The people who think differently. So obviously, there's a increasing demand for that. But the fact is, these people need to get trained first. They need to get skilled first before they can actually enter the job pool. And it's not a single problem. It's a combination of problems. So financing is related to education, is related to employment. I think thinking about these problems holistically, which is what we have done at MentorWorks, is going to be incredibly important as we approach the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because it's definitely a lot of that talk in education of like, there's a lot of emphasis right now around, career outcomes for students, which I do think is really important because that's what enables you to be able to live the life of your dreams, is have those financial resources, be gainfully employed. And I think some people push back on that we should be trying to educate the whole person and all that. And I think those things aren't mutually exclusive. And I think, that idea of being able to have impact and show that like, wow, we've, increased this person's income, by leaps and bounds and all that, and done it in a way that, sort of sustainable for them and not being kind of eclipsed by their debt. Yeah, I mean, and just the idea that like that is increasingly happening through skills. I think, there's still a lot of value in the bachelor's degree. And I think that that's something that people still will want to work towards, it's a dream for a lot of people, but certainly getting there can mean like, okay, well, I'm like stacking, different skills and certificates towards a bachelor's or something like that. Like there's just gonna be so many other pathways towards that. And I think a lot of different funding mechanisms to help people along with that, whether that's employer funding or things like ISAs and, exactly what you all are doing. So yeah, a lot to think about. I really appreciate you kind of laying everything out here. And we always like to make sure that folks have a lot to dig in with if they want to explore this topic further. So any resources you want to share, books, podcast, articles, certainly we'll have ways to, connect with you and the work that you all are doing there at MentorWorks. But anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, anybody can go to our website, mentorworks.com, and go to our blog page. We have a number of articles that we have written on everything from career search, networking, and all that good stuff, all the way to how to finance a higher education, different kind of skills-based programs. We also have, simple explanatory pieces on what is an income share agreement and how to address education finance with alternative financing options, how to think about your FAFSA, things like that. So anybody who's interested, more than welcome. Feel free to reach out to us. Our Talent Accelerator platform is a comprehensive careers platform, which is basically right now free to anybody who wants to sign up. So they could just sign up and utilize our platform to their benefit, and we can certainly fund anybody who's interested in educational programs that we work with. So we have those resources, and we hope that people can benefit from them.
Well, then we can wrap up always like to hear final thoughts, calls to action on this topic, anything that you'd want to close out the episode with as we wind down here.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. It's been really great talking to you, and I hope that you and your listeners get a lot out of this. As a young company, as a company in a highly regulated space, we're always looking to work with regulators, to work with partners who are always interested in higher education, in skills based employment and such. To that end, I think we need to think harder about how that combination of financing, education, and employment works together. I know there's a lot of wonderful initiatives that are happening out there, but it needs partnership from regulators, from the government, but also the private sector. And we are certainly working to get be part of those initiatives as well. So, I think, and as a practical matter, the federal income driven repayment program is actually really very much an ISA program. It's got $500 billion outstanding. It's got 8 million students in the IDR program. So this is not a new concept, but, there's a lot of regulatory aspects which are not yet set up for income share agreements. And I think we would love to work with regulators on that. More work needs to be done on that, certainly.
That is an important point, is that this is like a little bit of like the Wild West of like, doing funding at this sort of level that's not, a federal loan that's been around for a long time and, highly regulated and, trying to chart out a path to make sure that, I guess people understand that it's similar. It's not wildly different from things that have existed before and people are familiar with and comfortable with. And it's just kind of doing it in a different way. And especially your all's methodology, I think is kind of the way of the future that hopefully will distinguish ISAs as something sort of that plus one, something that already exists and just kind of upgrading it and making sure that the investment that's being made in students is, worth their time and their effort. And so I just really appreciate, again, the work that you all are doing, you taking the time and sharing all that you did. And again, we'll have ways to connect with everything we mentioned in this episode in the show notes as usual. But just thank you so much, Karthik, for taking the time and hanging out for the show.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.